This weekend, we received some news that there may be some potential changes coming to the way we acquire champions in the Bleed and DC Dark Legion. Today, we'll look at an official post from the community manager of DC Dark Legion to see what those changes will entail. I'll break down some of the math behind the changes, and I'll show you some of my pull data, and then I'll offer some suggestions for how I think this could end up being a positive change for the players, assuming the developers want to go down that route. I know this has sparked a little bit of outrage among the community, but I try to find a positive or a silver lining in everything. My hope with this video is to try to bridge the gap between the players who think that this is going to ruin the game and the fact that this update could actually be good with just a few tweaks. So I have the full post on screen and we can take a look at this together. It should be noted that the target date was planned for this coming week, but they've decided to postpone the changes in lieu of some of the player feedback. There's been a lot of negativity about the change. And honestly, I think they probably need to give us a little bit more data about the potential changes so that we can make or come to a better conclusion as a community. But we'll talk about that when we start going through the math a little bit. Before we get started, I may interchange a couple of different words to describe the Bleed Limited Mythic Champion. So you might hear me say Limited Mythic, you might hear me say Mythic Plus or M Plus, and you might see that in the graphic that I'll put on the screen a little bit later. But I'm talking about the 40 shard mythics that you can obtain through the Bleed. Champions like Superman or Constantine or Sinestro, etc. So the way the current system works, when you pull a Mythic Plus or M Plus champion, you're going to get 40 shards of it, and you'll also, like the first 40 shards that you get will allow you to unlock that champion at 0 stars, and then the subsequent pulls that you get are going to allow you to upgrade the stars. The proposed new system is going to work similar, but there are a couple of key differences. So every time you pull a regular 10 shard mythic or a mythic legacy piece, the proposed change would be that you would obtain 5 shards of the Mythic Plus champion. And then if you obtain a Mythic Plus champion, like a pull of them, is going to be reduced from 40 shards to 25. So the idea is that in a scenario where you get to full pity, so it takes you 200 anvils to obtain the Mythic Plus champion, you'll get 5 times 3, so 5 shards for each of the Mythic or Mythic Legacy pieces that you get, and then you'll get 25 for the Mythic Plus, resulting in a total of 40 shards. The idea is that you would still obtain shards kind of at the same rate in the new system as the old system, but the difference would be that for a lot of non-spenders, you would end up obtaining the white stars or even a couple of blue stars on a champion a little bit faster. And it's also just to make you feel a little bit better about obtaining those mythics or mythic legacy pieces, especially for people who have really bad luck and sort of hit pity most of the time. There's a couple other things to point out here. The first time that when you get the first pull of a Mythic Plus champion, the unlock cost is going to be 25 shards. So you get that first pull, you'll be able to unlock the champion. Subsequent pulls, basically the star acquisition or like building up the stars on a champion is going to be the same as the old system. So I actually have a graphic, maybe I can put it on screen now. In effect, the shards required by star graphic is still going to be valid going forward under the proposed changes. The only thing that's going to be really different is the acquisition of the shards and then the cost of that first unlock. And you can read the rest of this post by going over to the official Discord. I definitely highly encourage you to go over there, and if you'd like to leave feedback on this, there are a couple of feedback posts that you can tag on to. You can also talk about it in the official general chat. Definitely not asking that anybody be happy about these changes, but I do suggest that you try to talk about this as civilly as possible and try to provide some actual constructive criticism and some ideas for how they could make it better. I mean, if they're looking at making these changes to the Bleed, the best opportunity that we have to get some positive changes for the community is to be vocal in the most respectful way that we can. Moving on from the official post from Super Helen, I want to talk a little bit about a couple of things that I think are going to be important for when we get to the math in just a second. So if we go over into the details page on your bleed, you can see there are a couple of pieces of base odds that are going to be important for this discussion. So the first one is down here, the mythic shard acquisition. So anytime you use an anvil to draw for a champion in the bleed, you're going to have 3.84% chance to obtain either a mythic or a mythic legacy item. If you obtain a mythic or mythic legacy item, so let's say you hit that percentage, there's a second percentage, 26.9%, that you might hit the mythic plus champion. So you can take that 3.84% chance, you can multiply that times 26.9%, and you end up getting roughly a 1% chance that when you hit one of those mythic or mythic legacy items, that you might get the mythic plus champion instead. Now, obviously, we have the pity system that kind of goes into play with that as well, but these two percentages are going to offer us the ability to kind of reverse engineer or figure out exactly the rate of obtaining a mythic plus shard per anvil spent. That percentage or that rate is going to allow us to kind of create a couple of scenarios for what it will look like under the current system versus the proposed new system. Okay, so I've put together an infographic that I may or may not release onto Discord, but I definitely want to show it here. I know it may be a little bit hard to read on screen, especially if you're using a phone, but I'll try to talk you through each of these things so that you have a good idea of what's going on. There are some basic formulas that we can use to derive a couple of things. The first one we want to do is we want to figure out the amount of M plus shards or mythic plus shards per anvil spent. You can do that by taking 40 shards, which is the amount of shards you get for one copy or one pull. We multiply that times 3.84%, which is the one that we just saw, and that percentage is the chance that you will have to obtain any mythic. So mythic, mythic plus, or mythic legacy. You multiply that times the 26.9%, which is the percentage chance that that mythic that you end up getting is going to be a mythic plus, and that's going to give us 0.413184. That's the amount of mythic plus shards per anvil spent. We can use a similar formula to derive the amount of shards per anvil spent under the new proposed system, assuming that there's no change in probabilities. So Helen did say that there would be a change to the percentage or the chance that you might have to get a mythic or mythic legacy. So that's that 3.84%. Now, she gave the caveat that percentage change was going to be very minuscule, like very small, and to kind of like not get your hopes up. As you'll see, as we talk through a little bit of this, all you need is a very small percentage change there for everything to even out from the old system to the proposed new system. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, so we'll talk about this first. So we're going to calculate the amount of shards per anvil under the new proposed system, assuming no changes to probability rate. So you take the 25 shards, which is what you'll be getting for one copy of a Mythic Plus in the new system. You multiply that times the 3.84% times the 26.9%. And then you add the 5 shards that you're going to be getting if you get a Mythic or Mythic Legacy item. And we do kind of essentially the same calculation here. And that's going to give us 0.398592. So it's a very slight decrease in the amount of shards per anvil spent under the new proposed system with no changes to the probability. But given the fact that we do expect them to change the probability of obtaining a regular Mythic or Mythic Legacy, we do need to solve for that new percentage. And I had a couple of people who are way better than me at math help me arrive at this calculation. But essentially what you're going to do is you take the 3.84% out of the equation and we're going to solve for X. So I hate to scar people or, bring up spilled milk from your elementary school days, but basically it's going to be 25x 0.269 plus 5x 1 minus 0.269. and that's going to give you the 0.413184. And we can use that to solve for X. And if we do that, and you could plug it into ChatGPT or use a calculator or whatever to figure this out, it's pretty easy. But the new percentage is going to be 3.98%. So this is a 0.14% change. That's very small. And you'll see through my pool data here that we're going to talk about next that change is quite significant. So we're using a data set here with basically I recorded about 2005 polls dating back to February of this year. I did miss about a month of data, but I think 2000 polls gives us a decent window into what you can expect. It's certainly more polls than what your standard free-to-play player is going to get in that same time frame. This is kind of, a light spend set of numbers that we're working with here. Now, I obtained about 6 different Mythic Plus champions during that time. That's going to be an important number. And then I obtained 19 copies of Mythic Plus champions during that time. If you take the 19 copies that I obtained and you multiply that times 40, I obtained approximately or exactly 760 Mythic Plus shards. Now, if we use those percentages that we calculated at the top of this graphic, what I should have pulled under each of the systems is as follows. Under the current system, I should have pulled 828 shards of each of Mythic Plus champions. So you can see that I definitely did not have luck on my side. I definitely was not, hitting pity. I believe if you do the calculation per mythic, I believe it's about 105, 106. So that's kind of the average. The first 1,000, it was closer to 111. So I had a little bit better luck with the second 1,000 pulls, but you get the idea. I was, fairly lucky, but I wasn't as lucky as I probably should have been. The current system, I think you kind of should be able to expect with 2005 anvils that you could pull about 828 Mythic Plus. Under the new system with no adjustments, that number drops to 799. So what a lot of people are pointing out right now is if you do the new system and you don't change the pull rates, then we're going to be getting less shards. And there's another thing we'll talk about a little bit more later. But on top of that, you're not going to be able to star the champions up as much because you're going to be getting random numbers of shards as well. Like you're not going to get that crisp 40 number. You're going to get 25, and then you'll get 5 here and 5 there and 5 there. And, if you're incredibly unlucky, you're going to get just, these random numbers of shards, and it might not add up to what you need to get to the next star level. So definitely some problems there. But if we look at the new system with the percentage adjustment, so that 0.14% change, we can get that number back to the current rate. So the 828 shards for 2005 pulls. Now, I should point out, this is not a suggestion to FunPlus to just make the percentage change 0.14. I'm just trying to show that with just a very small change in percentage, we can get back to the exact pull rate that we already have. I really hope that they'll consider, if they're going to push forward with the change as is, they really need to consider much higher than the 0.14. It needs to be something quite significant so that we're getting more shards because of some of the negatives that we're going to talk about with the system when we get a little bit further into the video. You can see my pull rate calculation. So I have, it's essentially you take the 2005, you multiply it times the 0.413184 or the other percentages that we have calculated here, and that's how I'm arriving at these numbers. And the last thing is I did a breakdown for the current system, for the new system with no percent adjustments, and then the new system with the percent adjustments. And what I came up with is, so I guess the first thing that we have to do for my pull rate is, or for my data is, we have to account for the fact that I unlocked 6 champions. So with the current system breakdown, you take 6 unlocks times 40 shards each, and we get 240 shards. 240 of the 760 shards that I obtain are tied up in the unlock of those 6 champions. So we subtract the 760 minus the 240, that gives you 520 shards of duplicates. So you can run the math. You can look at my my shard chart that I just put on screen earlier in the video, and you can kind of see like what you would get. Now, in my case, I pulled for multiple different champions. This is bleed data over the course of many bleeds. And so those duplicates are kind of, I had 40 duplicates here, or I had 80 duplicates there for different champions. If I had pulled for one champion, we can figure that out too. So you take the 760, you subtract the 40 for the unlock, and then that's 720 shards of duplicates. We're going to take a look at how that pans out towards with the other two setups. So with a new system, no percent adjustments. If we account for the 6 unlocks at 25 shards apiece, that gives us 150 shards that we have to set aside to say, okay, we unlocked those 6 champions with that. So we take the 799 that we came up with earlier, we subtract the 150 for the unlock cost, and that gives us 649 shards of duplicates. Again, if I had pulled for one champion here with these 2005 anvils, you take the 799 minus 25, that gives you 774 shards of duplicates. And then if we look at the new system with percent adjustments, and we account for the 6 unlocks at 25 shards each, 150 shards, we take the 828, we subtract the 150, that gives us 678 shards of duplicates. Under this system, if I had have pulled for one champion, then it would be 828 minus 25, so that's 803 shards of duplicates. One thing I want to point out here with this chart, when I do the current system breakdown, I'm breaking down what I actually got, so you can see that. I didn't break down what I should have gotten in the current system, which is the 828. I mean, basically, when I do that for the new system with the new percentage, you're going to see that anyway. Now, there are a couple of takeaways here that you can kind of see immediately when you look at everything compared side by side. The first thing is the amount of duplicates that you're going to have, like the amount of extra shards you'll get after the initial unlock, is going to be more in the new system than the old system. Like any way you look at it, you're going to get more duplicates through the new system than the old one. Obviously, the new system with the additional percentage breakdown is going, or the additional percentage on the mythic acquisition formula is going to be better, but it is a significant difference. I think people keep saying that you're going to get less shards, and I think that's just not true. Now, we're going to talk about now the issue with the system, but I think it's just false to say that we're going to get less shards. And now that we've looked at the data, and I'll leave the graphic on the screen as well, we have to ask ourselves a few questions. I think there are a few issues with the system that need to be addressed. There's kind of an elephant in the room here. So let's talk about how I think this is going to affect various different players if it's implemented. And we're talking about them implementing a system that with the changed percentage, so it's going to be, the one on the bottom right of the screen right now. But I think the change is going to be a net positive for casual non-spenders. You're going to be able to get most of the bleed champions unlocked at white stars or even blue stars more quickly than the prior system. There's been a graphic floating around on how that might work, and I think it's fairly accurate. But once you get past those blue stars, there are some different dynamics at play. For whales, I think the change is going to be largely unfelt, especially people who take each champion to red 5. I think the worst part is going to be that when you get to the very end, you're probably going to have to do an extra pull for a champion, and it may be an inefficient pull, so you might be getting some world line fragments there at the end. And so, that's kind of a slight issue, but I think for whales, you're probably not going to be spending too much more than you were before. Probably just going to have to maybe acquire one additional copy of a champion. For non-whales who like to hoard, I think the change is going to be similar to that of whales. So if you're the kind of person who wants to sit on anvils for multiple bleeds, skip bleeds, and go for one specific champion here and there, I think this is going to be maybe not as unfelt as for a whale, but for the most part, you should be able to kind of predict how far you'll be able to take a champion, and it's not going to be quite as bad. Now, here's the issue. For light spenders and for non-spenders who like to min-max their accounts, and not necessarily people who hoard, but they just try to min-max their resources, I think this change is going to be the worst. It's actually going to be, quite bad for those people. You're perpetually going to end up with extra shards of each banner champion, and you're not going to have anything to do with them. That's a major issue. And I think a lot of the people who have been voicing their concerns about that have a good leg to stand on here. I mean, we kind of have to ask ourselves, why make this change in the first place? You know, if the idea is to make it feel like you're getting something for the mythics and mythic legacies, then just give us a random chance, let's say, to get 2 to 5 shards every time we draw one of them, or just give us the 5 shards on top of the current system. You know, that's kind of the idea. Let's give the players a little something when they don't pull the Mythic Plus champion to make us feel better. So yeah, I think like the first thing is, why not just give us a random chance to get a smaller amount of shards for the Mythic or Mythic Legacy items and just not adjust any of the other rates in the bleed at all? That would be actually a great olive branch to the players. I've seen a lot of feedback saying, just don't change it at all. Just forget this even existed and we won't be mad. I don't like that, because you know, it doesn't help the players, and it's certainly not going to help the developers. You know, let's come up with a solution that actually helps the players and you know, gives us something to make us happy. Now, I talked about, you know, the fact that mathematically we're still going to be getting roughly the same amount of shards in both systems, but the new system does add that major issue due to the fact that those extra shards are just going to be sitting around pointless from bleed to bleed. And it's going to happen for every single champion that you draw for as well. And part of why this is an issue is, even though you're getting the exact same amount of shards of Mythic Plus champions, you're going to be starring them up less. So, you know, if you're a non-spender, it won't be an issue, because most likely you're going to get to the same place, or actually even get further than you had been doing. You're going to for sure be able to get champions to white stars that you never thought you would be able to. And then you're probably going to be getting some of those champions into blue stars where you had never seen a blue star Mythic Plus before. So that's great. But like for anyone else, anyone who's pushing it higher than that, you know, it's definitely going to be a problem. So if the new system does get implemented, there needs to be a way to convert those excess shards on a 1-to-1 basis to another limited Mythic champion. If we had a way to convert excess Sinestro shards, for example, to get the shards of a past limited Mythic like Superman, then it would function as a mechanism for new players in a server to get access to old champions, or for a player who has excess shards that they can't use from a past bleed to be able to slowly star up an older champion that they want to focus on. This would be a win for all players. And it's something that we've, you know, you'd have to probably limit the like how many shards you can convert in a week. I don't want to go into speculation on what that might be, because I don't even know whether the developers would watch this video to consider this. But you know, let's say you're able to convert 40 shards a week or 80 shards a week or something like that. I think it would be a solid way to fix the issue and also solve a major complaint that's been around since the landscape beta of the game, which is the lack of ways to acquire limited mythics outside of the bleed. Ultimately, where I stand on this, and again, I'm trying to be as positive as I can be, I do not think that the developers are trying to do some sort of nefarious trick to take away our ability to obtain champions. In fact, I think they have a vested interest in making sure that this bleed change is positive for the players. What I set out to do in this video is show that the math is there to support the fact that we're going to be getting roughly the same amount of shards. I just want to propose a couple of additions that they really have to make to what they're wanting to do so that it works in a way that's helpful to players. And that's really it. I am curious what you think about this. Please feel free to provide your comments down below. I know that this is going to be very divisive. I'm sure I'm going to get a few people who are quite upset. I welcome all comments. I want to hear everyone out on this. If you have any solutions that you think would be helpful, if you made it this far, as always, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch these videos. I've got a lot of content coming soon. I've got tier lists coming up. I've got some team synergy guides that are going to be coming out. So looking forward to sharing that content with you, and I will see you in the next video.